And we will call the March 2nd, 2017 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission together, and I will call the roll. Rich Dane.
Present.
Mary French.
Present.
Adam Hagensick. Dave Huser.
Here.
Heidi Solheim.
Here.
We know that Kathy Olson and Kate Payne are not going to be with us this evening. The agenda was provided. Do you have any additions, corrections?
Move approval.
Motion to approve?
Second.
And we have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those of you in favor say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. And the agenda is approved as sent out. Minutes of the February 2nd, 2017 meeting were again distributed. Are there any additions or corrections? And a motion to approve if not.
Motion to approve the minutes of February 2nd.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. And the minutes of the February 2nd meeting are approved. The only communication I know is that there is a Board of Adjustment meeting, or there were, I think that's correct. There'll be 2 hearings. And this month? Okay. And what date? 13th. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Pete. And you did get the information on the ISU extension workshop that's going to be April the 18th in Waterloo, Iowa. There are several others that probably the closest one is going to be in Dubuque, if you can't make the meeting in Waterloo. And that'll be, I think it's May it's just before our meeting. Hang on.
April 18th.
Yeah, no, May 2nd, Tuesday, May 2nd at the Hotel Julian in beautiful downtown Dubuque. So if you can't make the Waterloo session, for those of you who haven't been, would strongly encourage you to attend one of these sessions. Okay, this is time and place for public hearing on a special provisional use for solar array at 1011 Copper Terrace in Northwest Waverly. Mr. Jeff Soash, property owner at 1011 Copper Terrace in Northwest Waverly. That's Northeast Waverly, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Let me make that correction. In Northeast Waverly is proposing to locate a ground solar array on his property for the production of his residential electricity generation only. The proposed solar panels are sought to be placed along the north side of the owner's property and will consist of 3 solar panels together at a size approximately 30 feet long by 17 feet wide and 12 feet tall. The city code requires the ground residential solar panels to be reviewed and recommended on by the commission prior to going on to council for review and to be screened from the street side of the property. Public notice was given to those within 250 feet of the subject property and was publicly advertised in the local Waverly newspaper. Ben, any comments on this application?
Well, our city code does outline the specifics for this, and I discussed that with Mr. Soash, and essentially we don't see a lot of this in Waverly, but here he is, and the requirement actually calls for all ground systems, they should be limited to the rear of the property and should avoid being an eyesight from the street. I'm just reading from our code here. They shall meet all setback requirements for the zoning district, and they're kind of viewed as accessory structures, similar to a garden shed or something like that. So in a sense, too, they are required to be screened. That is a requirement from the street. And so they are obligated to submit some semblance of a landscaping plan for us to review and see if they're kind of meeting the general requirements of that. So you see a site plan that was provided. You see kind of the general lay of the land and some of the pictures I took from the website there. And So you kind of get a sense for where it's going to be located. So with that being said, I know the intent is that the overall height would be about 12 feet or less. They're kind of angled panels, so to speak, and facing to the south for the southern exposure, of course. With that being said, I don't have anything else to add unless there's some clarification needed.
Okay. Hearing that, let's open the public hearing, and we have Mr. Soash with us. Jeff?
Evening, I'm Jeff Soash, and 1011 Copper Terrace, Northeast. What you had gotten is fairly close. The actual dimensions, now that we've got things a little more finalized, is 33 feet wide, 17 foot deep. The lower level of the site would be, it's a roughly 1 foot off the ground, and the rear is 8 foot 1 inch off the ground. So the height-wise is not quite what I had told Ben originally, because things have changed just a little bit, then we get a little more clarification. So, but it'll consist of 30 solar panels, approximately 3 foot by 5'6", and that's what makes up the array.
Well, Mr. Soash is at the table, and before we close the public hearing, any questions that you might have of him?
How is it going to be screened?
Right now, I don't know, I haven't seen the pictures that Ben took, but placement is approximately 100 feet off of the roadway. We already have trees that are between where the solar panels will go and the street. There's ones that are already on the boulevard, and we actually have 2 or 3 that are already planted and actually 8 years old by now, between that, where that array will go and the street.
But you've actually got 2 streets you need to screen from.
The other streets you can't see. You can't see into that part of the property from there. There's a hillside. If you drive down the street that's on the south of our property and look clear to the north, there's the street is elevated higher than where the solar array would be. You'd never be able to see it. Our house sits in there. There's no visible, and we also have trees that are already planted along the boulevard on that side also. I can see from Bill's picture that he's putting up, it doesn't give you the elevation change, but our property from south to north drops probably 12 to 15 feet from the south street to where the solar array would be placed.
Any other questions from the commission for Mr. Soash? And let's close the public hearing and conversation here from the commission.
I just had, I'm going to ask
Sure,
Jeff
sure.
one more question. If someday that is developed going to the north and hook up with the other street, is there, depending upon whatever development would take on the other side of there, would there be able to be enough room to, let's say they put a street in there on the north side of your property, is there enough room for you to screen that if you had to?
Yes, because we're set back the 10 feet requirement.
Okay.
I mean, so there's
There's a room
shrubs,
enough
trees,
to
whatever
screen
it
if
could
you
be.
had to, that if it,
Yep, and I know the plot plan for the next phase of that development, and the street actually goes straight north. There isn't any place to really,
Go
unless
straight
something
or
would
go
change,
east,
to be
west
able to
on
go
there.
to the west.
okay. I just got to thinking there, just thought, okay, if there was something.
Jeff,
there,
hold on a
it
minute.
would be-
But yeah, if that time ever came, right now there's trees behind us to the north.
Yeah,
But yeah, if we ever needed to add something there because of something went in, we gladly would
yeah.
put something else in there.
Yeah, who knows if it's ever developed, I just want to make sure that there's, if that ever came up, okay, how come they didn't
Yep.
ask that question? And because someday it'll be probably developed, but who knows? Thank you.
Jeff, can you tell me, are there any restrictive covenants for the subdivision regarding outbuildings or?
Yes, and it all falls within those. I've already talked to Denny Hoppel. We have another, what we call hut. It's a screened in, it's not a gazebo, it's it's rectangular, but it all falls within those same guidelines. And Denny's aware of the meeting because he called me and just to ask what was going on. So it all falls within what's there.
Any other commission comments?
It seems to me when Carnation came to us and wanted to put in a solar array that we had quite a discussion regarding what the neighborhood, how they might be impacted. And we, several years ago, wrestled with the windmill and generation that way. We took a very long time to look at that, and I wonder if we need to really explore the impact of these things over the years, how other cities look at it. I feel a little bit challenged and uncomfortable here because, frankly, everyone knows I kind of believe the landowner ought to be able to do what they want as long as it doesn't impact negatively their neighbor. Now, this does have the potential to negatively impact development behind it and the perception of neighbors. I don't know if we want to be discussing that and reviewing that as a commission or not.
But we've codified it, so if he meets that, I think we've just about, I mean, there's not a reason for us to not, if he meets all the, as Ben read off those, that criteria, I guess we'd be hard pressed to be able to hold it up.
He's actually exceeded the requirement. The height is considerably below what we require, so.
Yeah, that's the only thing I would say is that we could be going against our code. And,
Any of us remember discussing that?
Remember Nestle?
well, I remember the Nestle.
I mean, what's been codified? What been read off, I don't recall us ever discussing that, although, if it's there, it's there. I don't recall us as a commission ever discussing it.
Can't remember everything.
Well, I'll just chime in here. It is codified, and like I say, we don't see a lot of this in Waverly. This is relatively new yet. I know some of the technology is still relatively expensive. I know there used to be benefits for putting these up with in the form of tax credits. I understand years ago, and I don't know if those are still in play or not, but are they? Okay? And in a sense too, this is kind of meant for I don't know Jeff's full intent here, but I believe the intent is kind of supplement his electricity usage and kind of offset maybe some of the costs, some of the usage. But this does bring up, it is a physical structure in the back of a property in a residential setting. And so we did, list off the topics of setbacks. He's meeting those. Height, he's exceeding that. He's well below that. It's not within any easement. Screening, I don't believe he's meeting that requirement, just to be frank. That is a requirement. I'm just curious to hear about the commission's take on that. Aesthetics shall blend in with the surrounding settings. Well, I don't see how you can blend it in other than just trying to cite it so that's not obtrusive, and I think he's doing that. Maximum area of unit, the overall square footage, we look at it as an accessory use, and we count it against the accessory building requirement. So we checked all the other buildings on his property, the roofs, and he's well under that as well. So the only thing that's applicable here, in my opinion, is the screening for discussion. Everything else seems like it's being met, unless you see something else, with the character of the neighborhood that might be missing. But I just thought I'd chime in with that, just so you understand the requirements.
So as far as the screening, Ben, is that something that planning and zoning deals with, or is that more of the city staff that reviews that and makes that determination?
To be frank, it does say city staff.
Okay.
And I kind of just introduced this to Jeff really quick. I mean, I looked at the property, looked at the setting. I agree that it's a lower elevation, but I just don't see that it says shall be screened from street view to the extent possible without reducing their efficiency. So the intent here is allow them to kind of not be the prominent feature of a property in a sense and kind of be tucked away, so to speak, as much as possible as is practical. So.
But the screening is all plant material, correct?
But it's really not there. I mean, I
It
applaud.
doesn't say
I
plant
applaud-
material, it
yeah.
just says shall be screened from street view. So
I mean, I applaud him, being environmentally proactive here, and I think that's a great idea. The fact that there aren't any neighbors here to protest or, speak against it. But I'm looking at the photograph, which I think you took, it's showing the east side of the property.
I actually took that from a Google Street View from
And-
2013. So.
yeah.
But I did drive
And
by
at
and
some
look, and
point,
it's a similar.
at some point, maybe those trees will be, but I don't think there's any screening
guess-
along that side.
From 2013?
Mhm. And I drove by and looked at your property too. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, so at the pictures from 2013, those trees have 3 more full years of growth. There's been other trees from then that have been planted on the boulevard. And I'm not objecting if we need to plant a few more trees, but obviously, and I spoke with Ben when we first met, is there's the other part, if you plant too much, now you just
Yeah.
defeated the whole purpose of it.
And I'm with him there, yeah.
But yeah, well, I mean, we'll gladly work with city staff if they come up and say, hey, we'd like to see a couple more trees. The reason that, I can tell you that the neighbors aren't here is because we've already chatted. They already want to know, hey, what's going on? I told them, and there's only one neighbor that lives directly across the street. They're very good friends of ours, and I have a suspicion that there may be another one coming down the road, so it will come up again.
But other comments?
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Because this is the first time I've really actually looked at it, so. One of the things that our ordinance doesn't really address is, it talks about the rear, and when you have a corner lot, you really don't have a rear because there's 2 streets. I have no problem with the way it's set up and how it is, and it looks like it'll fit in well. I just wonder what will happen when somebody goes north, if the property to the north of there would then have a side that would be on their side instead of towards the back. And it really doesn't address that here, so it may be addressed in terms of what they intend to do. And if somebody was on that north side, maybe you'd want to screen that and put that on the other side of that. And maybe that should be one of our requirements, is to look at how it adjoins the adjoining owner. And I think that's more of what we do in the future to maybe help that situation like this one.
And I guess I'll just interject because I know that from the way it's written now, I'm not sure that you could really change, because everybody's backyard at some point, unless you're out in the country, borders somebody. If you look at changing that, now really you may restrict from anybody ever being able to put anything up. And I don't think that that's what the city would want to do, because now you're discouraging what's, potential. Ben and I kind of get it, because apparently there is one
Do
other
you
one.
mind, can you just come to the mic so everybody can hear you? Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Ben and I kind of talked, I guess there is one other one in town that's on the roof. That's a fairly good-sized solar array. I know that our neighbors across actually have one on the back side of their roof because it takes care of their hot water system. So there are other ones out there. I told Ben, and I've kind of looked around over the time, is that, what would you rather see, like our house or somebody else's house that faces south, the whole front of their house on the roof is nothing but solar panels, or being able to put it out in a backyard or a side yard where it's really unobtrusive. So just...
So I guess also, Bill, it says from the street, it doesn't say from, another property butting up to it, it just says from the street.
Which is, I'm just pointing out, and I'm really not objecting to this particular request, because I think it's a really a good place to do it, but it just kind of shows the limitations of how you try to draft something like you pointed out. It could be in the backyard of yours, but it could be in somebody else's, their side yard or their backyard, and it could be as obtrusive there. So I don't know what else to say, except it seems to comply, and it seems to be a good project, so.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the special provisional use request for the ground solar panels along the northern property line of the, I can't even read
At the size
it.
and with screening?
With screening material outlined by the applicant.
Got it. Do we hear a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just have one comment in here. It does have the screening material outlined by the applicant. I would still request that the city staff review it and make sure that it does seem sufficient for, I guess, appropriate, maybe is the correct word to end with.
Well, most of these things evolve because as we get into them, they become real and not theoretical, and we're learning some things from this application. So, any other comments?
And I just make the comment that even though it says by the applicant, it still has to, by codification, it's got to be approved by the city. So the city will work with them. So that's what you're really asking.
Right, that's,
Yep. All right, you ready for the question? Those in favor indicate yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. And it unanimously is approved. Jeff, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We move on to regular business. The review and recommendation on plat of survey with additional right-of-way to be dedicated to the city along 20th Street Northwest. Mr. Steve Trusky of Clapdale Garber Associates, Inc., acting on behalf of Echo Development Group, LLC, owners, is proposing the creation of parcels J and K along the east side of 20th Street Northwest. Parcel J is 23.95 acres, excluding 17 feet along the current right-of-way of 20th Street Northwest, which will be dedicated to the city of Waverly for future roadway and infrastructure improvements. Parcel K is 31.04 acres, also excluding 17 feet along the current right-of-way of 20th Street Northwest, is located on the south of Parcel J. This plat of survey follows the legal boundaries for the rezoning request heard at the February 2nd, 2017 Commission meeting, also requested by Echo Development, LLC. Plat of survey review is brought forth for the Commission to review in times when future right-of-way is proposed, and these plats show additional right-of-way to be dedicated to the city. Ben, some comments?
Yeah, I'll just introduce this by saying this is a plat of survey in a sense to combine the three lots into two. You see the parcels J and K, and they're also looking to dedicate the right-of-way, similar to what was done to the south along the east side of 20th Street with the former Eisenach development. The same exact amount of right-of-way was requested by city staff with this plat of survey being submitted. So in a plat of survey such as this, too, can go either way. Initially, I thought this ought to be appropriate to bring forth for the commission to review. And now I'm looking at it as a plat of survey where you could probably lean the other way, too, and say it probably ought to because of the right-of-way. So I'm kind of in the gray area here. So I've leaned towards not actually seeking a formal recommendation from the commission on this for that purpose. We have a lot of property owners doing plats of survey to correct boundaries, to combine three lots into two, and in a sense, it's, in my opinion, a little immaterial at this point to really say this is really worthy of review, so I just ask that maybe comments be taken only and not a formal action, but that's really up to the commission at this point because it is on the agenda. But that would be my recommendation, is that it be for comment only and that it not be brought forth for formal resolution by council, because in a sense, any future right-of-way request shall be reflected on a subdivision plat if and when that time comes as well. And then you'll see additional potential roadways too at that time, if and when it happens. So is that clear enough for everybody?
I think
Any
the
questions?
request makes a lot of good sense. Let's go around and see what comments or thoughts members of the commission might have.
I guess my only thought, I like waiting till future action, but was this not rejected by council? And if so, why would we act on it?
I wasn't at the council meeting. Maybe Bill can enlighten us a little bit.
This was a rezoning application of parcel J and parcel K, which was tabled and then has been since withdrawn. So it didn't get ruled upon or voted on by the council. And that was on the zoning for the parcels J and K. I think you're talking about the 17-foot right-of-way? Is that what you're? And the 17-foot right-of-way is being proposed at our request, the city's request, because we want 20th Street to have a 100-foot right-of-way as an arterial eventually. And so every time we have the opportunity, we're asking that they give us an additional 17 feet on the corridor to give that side a 50-foot side right-of-way. And so that's what we've done. I think that's what's being shown here.
And I guess I'm just saying, or if parcels J and K do not exist, because council said no to the rezoning.
But I guess council didn't say no. What happened was that there was a motion to table, and almost simultaneously there was a request by the developer to withdraw the application or withdraw the proposal for the time being so that he could gather more information because he saw the questions that were being raised. So it in fact was then tabled. Someone will have to, if we act on it, bring it back to the table. But if no one brings it back, then we won't act on it. But if it's brought back, which I suspect it will be, somebody put it on the table again at the appropriate time, then we'll act on it at that point in time.
And let me just point out one thing too, and thank you, Edie, for that explanation. I know that with a rezoning application, you're essentially setting the boundaries of your rezoning request. It could or could not follow the existing lot lines within your property limits because if a property owner consents to a rezoning. We've had a case where your rezoning boundaries don't have to match your property lines. Here you have a case where you're right, Rich, in that you had a rezoning request that mirrors these J and K that are proposed with this plat of survey. However, if that goes away, this still comes forward and this still could be recorded. Okay? So same property owner, it still retains both lots. Instead of 3 lots, there would be 2 resulting. Does that make sense? And that's essentially what this plat of survey clarifies. And the additional right-of-way request by city staff to mirror what was done on the south side. I don't know where you're going with your question, but I assume that's kind of where you were going maybe
Just
here.
clarifying.
Okay.
Okay.
And-
What I
Make sure I'm
read in the
answering
paper
it.
said it didn't exist, and here we're taking action on something that doesn't exist.
So the rezoning doesn't exist, but this plat of survey does. So in a sense, you can create a new boundary of description within your property limits if you so choose, as long as you're not creating an additional lot or proposing additional right-of-way. Well, the additional right-of-way, question is, does that mean a new road punching through it, or does that mean expanding a right-of-way that's adjacent to you? It's a little gray, in my opinion, the code, so I'm bringing it forth for review to say we could probably just comment on it and do it as that is my opinion, but if you so choose, you can make a formal motion to approve or deny it based on whatever rationale, you think or choose is in the best interest of planning.
Well, in my position is that I'm simply asking a question of point and order. I really don't care which way we go.
And I guess in terms of the rezoning, to me, the rezoning application has been removed from it's been pulled, and so it makes the issue before the council moot at this time. It's like it's a start over.
It was withdrawn.
It was withdrawn. And we allow that to happen up until the time it's disposed of. Thinking about the J and K, generally when we create lots out of existing properties that's owned by one owner, we judge if we do staff review of those. In this case, it's a little bit more than, maybe somewhat different than that, and maybe I would just urge you folks to go ahead and do a review of this today, if you would like to do that. I think it's okay to do that in this situation. It's kind of an advisory thing, and I think it's maybe a good move to have that reviewed, and you can ask questions as to how they set this up and what they did, because they were just different parcel lines that were basically agricultural parcel lines, and what they've tried to do is set up in a manner that the development, they may seek a different zoning for each parcel, which is why they separated them into 2 parcels. We would not allow any development on those properties until they come back to this body for a subdivision build-out plan, the lots and the streets and the improvements.
Along with the rezoning request.
Along with the rezoning request. Now, we do allow the rezoning request to come before the subdivision plat might come, again, in the future. But I think it's okay. Staff has reviewed the J and K configuration, and it certainly meets our standards for that kind of a reconfiguration of the lots. And so we would approve it, but if we would urge maybe the P&Z to go ahead and take a look at it.
It seems to make sense. I mean, no matter what the zoning is, whether it stays agricultural or residential or who knows what, the city would still like to have this additional right-of-way. So if we do it, now, the developer, as he moves forward, already knows he's got 17 feet left of, less of frontage.
And don't we have a similar situation coming up for the property that was recently annexed to the north on the west side of 20th Street?
It's north of this property.
Yes.
And that will be.
Is it on the east side also?
Yeah, it's straight north of this property,
Okay.
adjoining it.
Okay.
And they haven't moved on that or done anything with the.
But I'm saying that would likely come under
We
the
would ask
same
for the same
sort of
right-of-way.
scrutiny. Yeah.
I mean, Mary gets her road she wants.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The road's there, I just want a better road.
So Bill, just from a
I said
process,
the
getting
road that
back
she wants.
to Rich's question, that was confusing at city council. So once it was withdrawn, are you saying, because I seem to remember we did act on a tabling, but you're saying once it's withdrawn then, that sort of supersedes the tabling vote, so it can't come back until he brings the proposal back? Is that basically how it works? Okay.
The way we look at, when it was tabled, it was just basically delayed. You set it for a different agenda. And before a matter is resolved before the council with a vote on that particular issue, the applicant can remove that. And that happens
Okay.
when different questions come up about what's being proposed,
Sure.
and then maybe they bring it back in a slightly different way, or whatever they do. We allow that to occur, and when it occurs, it kind of stops the process, and we ask that they
Okay.
start the process over. Some of them have done it within days after filing, and even then, sometimes we return the fees. In this situation, we incurred fees and time and all that, so we wouldn't return the fee on the withdrawal of that application. We just required to start over from scratch with a new fee and a new application.
The council could not, for example, someone from council could not move to bring that agenda item back to the table because the proposal has been removed.
That's what I believe is
Okay.
the way it works.
Okay,
It doesn't exist in effect.
okay.
Okay.
But if it does come back, we do not have to have a plat or anything that was talked about in that city council meeting. The rezoning is a rezoning, and I think that there was a question that said, well, they would like to see a plat. Well, we don't have to on a rezoning. I mean, I think that city council members, some members of the city council need to understand that is how it works. And
Well, it was explained to those members who said that
I just
at the
want to
meeting.
reiterate it
Yeah.
because I was not very happy with how it came out in the paper.
Right.
The characterization of this commission.
Misunderstanding by some other council people.
Right.
I was upset that Hank had left.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, it was. I think there were people who spoke to it. I think Bill might have spoken to it, and if I remember correctly, I think Tim Kanga spoke to it. I didn't say anything because I would have just been repeating what Tim said. I think we just have to make that clear. I mean, I guess my recommendation would be, if and when it does come before our city council again, that the staff introduction by James or whoever, or you, whoever is doing it, outlines that pretty clearly.
And the applicant the last time was the owner, and the contract purchaser was not the applicant. And I think that was the confusion, and I think that information maybe was the problem that the landowners had around it. And maybe it won't make a difference, maybe it will make a difference. And I think that's why the parties decided that they would rather go back and start a restart so that they can bring it forward with an application that actually fully informs the adjoining landowners and residents as to what is being planned and what is being proposed. We intend to, again, require that they limit the units to 4 attached, because in R3, as it's presently configured in our ordinance, would allow more than 4 to be attached. And we felt that that was not consistent with the Eisenach Village design, and that would have been something that we would have not recommended to go beyond what Eisenach Village has continued to the north. And so that's going to be another important thing that we will require in this situation for this property on this, if it's brought back the same way.
I think, going back to Dave's comment, though, we have a formula that has a step-by-step process, and there was no need to bring forward the name of the people that were going to be acquiring the property, that what we took forward was totally in order, and I guess we have some education to do.
Yeah.
But they did come out and say that night what it was going to, what the end use was going to be, and so, I mean, it was informative to those people that were in attendance. So. And they knew that there was not going to be some high-rise or some low-income type of facility. And I was just appalled by some of those people on the council that tried to bring that out, that wasn't the case, you know. So
Yep.
I mean, I just was very upset about it, and I didn't think the paper got it very well either. So
Well, I think if and when it does come back, I think, like I say, a very, very clear introduction by staff and, will be helpful, and I'll certainly try to clarify some of that too if there's conversation surrounding it.
Any other comments? Ben, I think you've got at least a good start on getting what you were looking for.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the next item of regular business, item number 2, review of comprehensive land use plan and future land use map amendments, and set public hearing for formal recommendations. I don't know that we need to read all, well, let's do it because we got people at home. Following previous meetings held on October 25, 2016, November 15 of 2016, and December 20, 2016, and February 9 of 2017, the City Planning Commission and the Iowa Northland Regional Council of Governments, that's INRCOG, reviewed the accomplished goals of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan for Waverly that was produced in 2011, and the future land use plan map. Following these meetings, INRCOG is presenting the proposed amendments to each document. The Commission will review the proposed changes, and a public hearing shall be set, and at that time, the documents shall then be recommended for council approval. You got a copy of the edited comprehensive land use plan, the 2017 review, and appreciate the way that you can see precisely what was removed and the language that was added as a result of those many meetings, those many planning meetings that we had. And I think it makes the case that we can do these kind of reviews in the off period, i.e., something between when we normally would do the comprehensive land use plan following the census, to keep it updated and to keep it a viable document. So are there any comments or that I think perhaps you've had a chance to take a look at it? Then I do have one comment on the land use map. My recall was that we decided to remove the diamond interchange on the highway between the exit on 4th Street and the Route 3 exit, and it's continues to be shown on the map.
And I'll just explain that it does continue to be showing up. It's kind of what I call the rebound effect. When it's after meetings with the Planning and Zoning Commission, there are some that say it shouldn't be there. When we show it to other city staff, including public works personnel, it magically shows up again. So, in other words, there was kind of a dialogue among staff that in the end, it probably is best, even though to show it, even though it may not happen for another 50, 100 years, however long you want to say it. And the rationale for that is it's an evenly spaced interchange arrangement that the Iowa DOT would approve in theory because it's spaced out enough from the other existing interchanges. And with that being said, if Planning and Zoning Commission, if you guys don't feel strongly about it, I'm all ears, but I know as staff, we really feel it is important to keep it on there.
And I'll just,
For a number of reasons, just to show that it is a proposal that will happen someday if and when it does happen. The question is, how many years out will it happen?
one thing that our engineer indicated is that that's the ideal alignment for the spacing, and also it hooks up to a road on the south side, an intersection that could possibly be used. And the only reason that he thinks it's important to have it here is just the idea that you have to protect from further development in that particular corridor. And whether it's going to happen, we don't know. So that's our response to you, is that getting it back from the others in the building.
Is this the new exit, or like on 218, or, okay.
Yes, in the southwest part of Waverly city limits, yes, outside of
That's because he's wanted it since the last time we went through this whole process.
But he doesn't really see it happening anytime
I know,
really soon,
but-
but he just thinks you shouldn't allow, if you don't have it on there, it's hard to justify opposing someone putting a facility or a development right in the middle of where it might be. So that's the only rationale that,
And we could have then, was it Highway 58 and Viking Road? We could have that same issue then 50, 100 years from now if we don't plan for it.
they'll be cursing us in the future, right?
Well, I know it's properly cited, because I think the ground rules were that they want, IDOT wanted about 2 miles between interchanges, although they do make exceptions to that. And
It's about the only location that actually works, so.
yeah,
Isn't that because he wants his sewer plant down there?
No, that's not, and that even wouldn't be there, because the sewer plant would be in a waterway rather than
Low point.
in that, it would be farther to the east.
10 years ago?
we probably ought to put, at some point though, a value on that sewer plant, so that as people are doing long-range planning, this will not be a small investment, and it will be necessary if we're going to be able to do some of the things we're talking about doing with this future land use proposal.
We even think that could be south of the freeway. I mean, if you're doing another, so you're talking about a lot of growth in the south.
I'm thinking more of the
West.
money that's involved in creating the facility. We need to be thinking about that, so that
Yeah, we're spending, $10 million or $9 or $10 million in 2021, in 2022 to replace our current.
yeah.
And I'll just add another change from one thing you just mentioned too. One change that I like to see is actually, it's more or less a bookkeeping issue, is I realize the city boundaries in the northwest part along 20th Street Northwest did not reflect our recent annexation from December. So I just talked to Intercog about that today, and they'll update the map and reprint that off.
I think we made that assumption
Yeah.
at the meeting that
I just didn't see it on this latest, and so I just mentioned it. So they are aware of that, in case anybody else caught that.
Are the sizes on the proposed residential that border State Route 3 coming to the east from 218, are those in the configuration that pretty much satisfies what we were talking about? I guess it's the commercial, not the residential, the pink.
I think it probably addresses what most everyone other than me said.
I was waiting for you.
Still think it ought to be mixed use at best, but
And for the record, it's showing it as like a crosshatch. For those that can't decipher it, it is like a industrial / commercial crosshatch. It's kind of hard to see if you're really unless you look at it closer.
well, really?
So I mentioned that. Well, that's why I mentioned it.
Yeah, you can see it, yeah.
Ben, where do we need to go from here?
We're just looking to, per the agreement and per the future comp plan, we actually had to set an ordinance, set a date of public hearing formally, which we didn't do that before this meeting, so we're asking that you just set it for the April 6th meeting, and then you essentially will, one last time, review everything. We'll put it in the paper so that anybody who's interested in this can have one final say on it, and then we kick it over to our council for a resolution, and then that resolution will, in theory, be accompanied with that plat, and it'll be an effective record, and it'll be adopted.
So effectively, what we've done is we've created a continuum on the planning that was initiated in 2011 so that it'll carry forward to the next cycle. Okay. Any other comments?
Well, before we close it, I guess I'd like to hear if the commission says the diamond out there on 218 is perfectly acceptable and staff has determined what we should approve, or are we going to say, no, take it back out? I'd just like to hear what the whole commission says, that we don't just get it swept under the rug. Either we agree or we don't.
Personally, my view is we are going to be looking at this and updating it many times before something like that would ever happen. I don't have a problem actually seeing a dotted line on there for it.
And what I hear you saying is leave it on for the time being, but it has some vulnerability in terms of its
I think there's
continued
benefit
life.
of leaving it on for 20 years from now when maybe the current city staff isn't here. Hopefully, we're not all, Adam maybe, still sitting on this commission, but, you know, we're off golfing or something.
We have our next David.
Exciting that, yeah. So. I won't be here, I promise. Yeah.
Now, for the record, we shouldn't be planning for that reason. You know, you should plan for something that'll carry us long term. But I appreciate that, your comment.
Yeah.
Knowing that it's not set in stone, it's actually a dotted line, not etched anywhere on a stone somewhere, so I'm good.
I noticed, though, when Mike said that, I followed that south of the freeway and then on that angled road that comes over and back over to 218. And that's the proposed intersection for the new interchange between Waverly and Janesville. So it makes some sense to have the potential of connection there for that reason.
Or potential bypass, in theory, if that roadway's under construction or.
Yeah, I mean, because that allowed that to go over and you'd be able to go up through that. So there is somewhat of a corridor there.
Ben, do we have any obligations with respect to the county or to Shell Rock in sharing any of this ahead of time, just so they have a sense about our intention?
Well, we certainly share it with them.
Good.
We share it with them in a conversation, and if they feel something ought to be omitted or added, we can certainly talk about it. However, the power of we were planning for our community, and so they can chime in and we can take it into consideration, which we have. But we haven't reached out and showed them this because it's not finalized yet, but we'd be happy to show it to them and see what they think as well.
Other comments? Let's hear a motion to set the public hearing, and do we need to resolve, do we leave it in, do we take it out? Want just a straw vote on it, get a sense about it? For me, I'm okay to leave it in, because it's not going to happen for a long, long time.
Rich, we left your north road across the
that-
big river expanse.
That's true, but in reality, Cedar Park Lane or whatever it's called out there, our forefathers saw in their wisdom to plan, and we're supposed to be planning, not just kind of throwing stuff out there. So I guess leave it in, that's fine, but I think we're failing at our task.
David, what would you like to do with the interchange?
I'm just thinking what he was saying. Are we failing at our task?
We're not planning, we're not taking a responsibility and saying this is the way it ought to be because it's going to change. Doesn't matter.
I would tell you,
There's a lot of things that
Well, I
have
hope
changed
it's not set in stone anywhere here.
from the first time we did comprehensive plan. There's been things that have changed. There's areas in here that have changed, that have gone from commercial. I think of Cedar Valley Parkway, and in that area there, that was talked about being some commercial area in there, and they're now housing. So it's, things change and evolve over time. So our look at it right now, this is what we think. I think we're doing our task. I'm fine with it.
I think we're doing our task and leaving it in there. Right now, development is more towards the north, but it may, at some point, they're going to say, no, we want to be closer to the city center, and they're going to have to move south and southwest. And I think it's being proactive to put it in there and keep it. Maybe rather than someday someone saying, well, wish we had an interchange here, and it's too late to do it.
Adam?
I would agree with what Mary said, because I think if some people are going to go south to Cedar Falls, it'd be easier to, like Heidi always says, going from the north end of town all the way to south, it takes a while. Having an interchange right there, planning for an interchange right there makes sense.
Okay. I don't know that we need to vote on it. I think you've got the sense of the council, of the commission, rather, and
Are we going to set a public hearing?
I think we should.
Need a mo-
Thank you.
Hear a motion for a public hearing coming up in April?
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend setting a public hearing for deciding upon the Comprehensive Land Use Plan 2011 amendments and the Waverly Future Land Use Plan map changes for April 6, 2017.
Second.
Here we have a motion and a second, and Ben, I'm assuming that broadcast notice in the papers is what we do on one of these, since it's
Yes.
everybody, okay.
Yep. We'll give people the time, place, date.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, those in favor, say aye. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. So we will have a public hearing at the April 6th meeting of the commission. Let's go to item 3. Review and recommendation on ordinance amendments to R3 and R4 zoning districts. City staff from the Community Development Department has reviewed the R3 and R4 ordinance provisions for conformance with the goals set forth in the last comprehensive land use plan. The goals were listed in the housing section, and the proposed ordinance amendments to the R3 and R4 districts aim to provide for provisions that will achieve a medium to high density of housing options while reflecting some common elements from other Iowa communities. This draft follows the adoption of the R1, R1A, and R2 residential districts approved by the city in 2016. Staff presented a draft at the February 2, 2017 commission meeting and is now presenting a draft reflective of comments received. You've got 4 documents that were provided for this. Comments?
I'll just start off by saying that we had the intent of bringing this forth for formal review and recommendation by the commission tonight. And I'll be honest, after I submitted this for the agenda, and Bill and I were really looking at this again, and what we decided is, not to embarrass you, Bill, but Bill had suggested that maybe we ought to relook at this one last time to make it a little more simplified. Some of the verbiage used in there, some of the terminology, try to clean it up a little bit. So I'll be up front and say, as staff, we're not finalized in this version tonight. So I just asked maybe tonight we just look at just comment and open to ideas and comments too. If there's some things that you're looking at and you're just saying, this doesn't make much sense to me, or it makes sense, maybe we can expand upon this area a little more. Again, trying to look at it more from a broad view. And I apologize for giving you the hard version of an actual ordinance format, but in theory what we want to do is follow the same format as we did with the R1, R1A, and R2, where we spell out the involvement of the lot widths, the driveway configurations. Again, try to look at it from what I call the humanistic view of things when you're actually on the property looking at it. How do you know, what's the scope of things? How's it laid out? So with that being said, I'm open to your ideas about that idea as far as just getting comments tonight and polishing it up and bringing it back again.
Then just a quick logistical question. The document dated February 20 is an overview of the of what was said, or how we got to where we are. But it's the document that is headed City of Waverly Proposed R3, R4 that we're going to be taking forward to council.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that it isn't that document that you want to hold, but rather the overview. Is that correct?
Well, no. What we wanted to hold back is the actual draft.
Okay.
The second attached item there, where it
Okay.
says City of Waverly Proposed R3 and
The
R4.
9-page.
Yeah, the 9-page document. Yeah. So we're probably essentially looking at cutting back from 9 pages to probably 6. After really
Okay.
looking at it with the the attorney eye and the verbiage and looking at that, kind of cleaning it up. So.
I think anything you can do to see it big and keep it simple is going to be in our best interest.
And again, so you have the benefit of kind of looking at this, kind of a snapshot. You can glance at it, read through it a little bit, process a little bit. Feel free to bounce questions off me outside of meeting time too, so that May can ask it during the meeting. Say, that question I asked you about. Maybe you can relay what our general gist of our conversation was for the benefit of everybody. That could help. So, again, my office is always open to you guys to throw in your input. You are part of the planning commission as well, so you guys have some input into this, and that's why we bounce it off you guys. So appreciate it.
One of the things that we talked about was in the R3 district. We had talked about the 2, 3, and 4 attached units being in that and limiting it to that within the R3. When we got to provisional uses, we really were we kind of struggled with this, and it was kind of setting up how we practically would review these and how they would look when you review them. We kind of got to the idea that we need a development plan in these, which I know he's provided for, and showing for the access and drives and sidewalks. Talked about the infrastructure connections. But then we also talked about having combinations of green space, landscaping, outdoor recreation area, and trails. We're trying to get this a little bit more simple to go through so people understand what they're being expected to build or not build and what the requirements are going to be. We're not trying to make necessarily more requirements just to make more requirements. We clearly, it sort of brought up when we had the discussion about the rezoning to R3, brought up this idea that presently people are afraid of R3 because of how it now allows multiple buildings and larger structures. And so we wanted to kind of focus on the R3 being a different kind of zoning district. And so what is it going to look like when not just having one lot that then we put one unit on and that's it, but it's how do we do a collective group like Eisenach Village. And you have to look at what we have existing because people always do as a comparison. What do you expect in your R3? And we kind of felt like Eisenach Village was one of those examples of what we're looking at with R3. And so when you started looking at R3, or the Eisenach Village model, you started seeing the limited driveways, the green space requirements, the bringing in trails or whatever to that development. As opposed to an R3 where you might just have somebody buy a lot and put up a duplex, or buy a lot and put up a triplex or a fourplex. That's still going to be relevant, but we're trying to figure out how to do the more planned development aspect of that.
Kind of a campus.
Yeah, campus type look. So we're trying to refine those, and we're trying to, and then the special provisional uses. I know we talked about some of these that. Why do we want to let some of these be in these R3 districts? So we talked about removing some of those special provisional uses because they kind of let a lot of things in that maybe aren't practical. If you look at, we talked about the clubs, lodges, fraternities, sororities in a R3. Well, that's not really what we envision anymore, because that's more maybe in the R4 or in a commercial district. Even bed and breakfast, I mean, how many bed and breakfasts are you gonna see in a fourplex or a threeplex or a twoplex? And so we're trying to kind of clean that up a little bit by taking some of those out and not having everything in every zoning area. And so that's kind of the feedback. I mean, do you agree with that? I think we're more trying to,
See, I think you did that with the proposal north of Eisenach.
right,
And there's somewhere in all of this that common sense has got to be able to come to the fore. And you take something where you can pretty well describe it, but you put those little amendments in and say, for this use, we intend that you would do this, 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 and this. I don't know that I'd want to take that away by trying to be so precise with our documents that we don't have any room to use common sense.
and I agree with that to some extent, although what we've put in here for special provisional uses, to me, doesn't apply very well. I mean, you know, when you get to the swimming pools and recreation centers and country clubs and golf courses and libraries, and, I mean, I guess we're kind of focusing on, these are residential areas, and we're trying to keep the residential areas so that they are what they are, and if people expect it to be much more than 2 and 3 and 4 unit developments.
Well, you still have
Yeah.
the ability to not allow those because of the special provisional use. And my concern might be that if you, like, say, put them into an R4, I'm just trying to think with what you're saying here, or picture that. Could you end up having a spot zone if you needed something like that right next to the R3, if you didn't have that as a special provisional use, and then you have this R4 that sits just by itself, you know, in order to accommodate something that, one of these items. I don't know, I'm just trying to
Sure.
think there, because you still have the ability to not allow that with your vote as a special provisional use, so that's the only thing I was thinking about. I'm just trying to think where an example might come in with one of these items in here, but as soon as we take it out, then sure as heck it's going to come before us sometime, and then we're going to have to say, why weren't we thinking about that? So that's the only thing, but because you still have the ability to not allow it with the special provision.
Well, keep in mind that we had some objections to the Waverly Veterans Post being in near a residential area. And the question is, you know, if you have an R3, then you're expecting to have developments where they have threeplexes and fourplexes and
A higher
twuplexes.
density.
Yeah, are you really, if you say you can have it, but then you say, but we're not going to allow it because we don't find many places that we allow it, then why do you even have it as a potential special provisional use? You know, churches used to be in residential areas, and now churches are fairly large structures with fairly large parking areas and footprints, and now you think that really should be more in those commercial or high-density areas as opposed to R3, which we've now restricted to 4 units or less attached. We're trying to make that a less dense district, and we're putting in some things that probably maybe belong in the R4 side, but maybe not in the R3 side. That was my main concern, is making sure we have that R3 district that is really, because otherwise the people that are afraid of the R3 in this last discussion would still be afraid of the R3 because there's potential for a lot more things in that district. And we're really intending to create a residential medium-density district that shouldn't scare the R1s that are next to it. That's kind of what our discussion started with.
I think the Eisenach area is kind of a different animal, though, to me, than what I consider what R3 may be other places. So I kind of, I guess, agree with Dave on you want to keep some of that because you want to have a community center in a way in some of the residential areas. So you have walkability, you have that family friendly too. So like I see a daycare center as a provisional use. To me, I think in some of these areas we have to allow that. Otherwise, we're just really restricting opportunities for family growth and development and stuff too. So I think it's just hard. And I think where I'm struggling a little bit is it feels like the R1 through R2 we spent a lot of time kind of combing through as a commission in off meetings and working through that, and I feel really somewhat disconnected yet. So I'm trying to just catch up and to figure out where we are on this. So I think that's where I'm struggling personally, is to, because I still see R3 as being near those arterials, so it's, you know, it's bridging that gap, but yet we're saying it's non-residential uses, including services and, you know, that are serving the neighborhood. So
And I still see it as not necessarily always on the arterials too, because
Sure.
now R3s are becoming kind of the choice of a lot of people, whether it be townhouse, you know, connections, and I mean, and I'm not saying it isn't an arterial primarily district type of thing, but I don't know that. And frankly, it was the question that I wanted to ask. It wasn't telling you what I think we should do. It's getting more information and actually having more discussion about these items so that we're not pushing through.
But I've never seen a community that associates anything other than a single-family home as low income or, you know, substandard. Once you say it's, you know, it's a duplex or whatever, it doesn't matter how much it costs or how well it's done. There is a perception here in Waverly that it is, you know, substandard.
Because there's always there could be a fourplex that's high end, and there can be a fourplex that's low end. I mean, we know that.
And it's all rental and low-income people.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, and that's true, because once it's R3, it can be used for that purpose, yeah.
And then it's the not in my backyard syndrome.
So that's I mean, I guess that's the question I'm raising. And if we need to have another work session, maybe that's a good time to do that, because
Well, and I don't
this
wanna
is a hard thing to do. And we don't want to spend another hour here doing the same thing that we could maybe do in an hour that's easier to go around the table and actually have that discussion. So that was my thought.
I think that's kind of what you were suggesting, some work.
Well, and I don't want to
Time to
add
really
work
focus
either.
on it.
So or you know what I mean? I'm like, did I miss a meeting? Or, because I feel like we were pretty intentional when it came to the other or districts.
And I know we had talked about this would be the night and time to kind of talk about this too, and so we kind of threw it out here saying, well, here's our thoughts as a snapshot in time. However, that has changed after, you know, Bill and I were looking at the language, and it was, you know, Bill was like, well, maybe this could be a little simplified in terms of maybe instead of just listing out everything A through, you know, Z or whatever I had listed there, he goes, how about we condense it and just as a conceptual, maybe just make a 1 or 2 sentence statement to encapsulate all that. And that's kind of hard to do sometimes. So, and that's why we threw it out there to say, I mean, what's your sense about it? Is it overly wordy? Are we on the right mark by saying that, or do you think that, you know, how do you? What's your reaction, I guess, to that when you look at it initially?
The reaction is that's something a committee can't do, because it's sort of like trying to have a committee design the horse, you know, the thing they say, yeah, you end up with a camel. But I think you've heard most of what this group has had to say over the past 6 months. And I think if you take those things you've heard and try to put them into a capsule and then bring them back, I think that would make good use of our time. And if somebody would really like to be a part of that, let Bill know and go from there. Does that make
You bet.
Does that make sense?
We'll bring it back the next time for review then. More of a finalized version for you to look at.
I want to just do a check. That's one person's opinion. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that's what I was kind of saying, that I really think we need to think through that. I mean, are we making some of those decisions based upon what happened at the last?
Actually, the discussion came before that.
Yeah.
So that really wasn't, but it sort of, it reinforced it for me a
around
little
it,
bit.
and it seemed like- But I just think we could be hurting ourselves in long range.
Well, I know the concept here is like, let's throw a scenario out there. Let's say somebody proposes to rezone 10 acres into an R3 district. What are you going to get with today's code? Anything from single family to light office usage, to be honest, and anything in between, including churches and things in between. However, with our proposal, the thought is, with the draft here, if you're going to rezone a large chunk of land, we want to see some semblance of a thought-out conceptual, or, you know, something that shows that it's not just going to be a carte blanche, R3. We know what we're going to get with an R3 because we're trying to narrow it down and weed out some of that. Does that help illustrate kind of what this proposal? That's where we're going with it essentially.
Site plan oriented too. So we're seeing site plans as opposed to lots.
So we do want to bring some of it back to possibly to the commission and then to the council for final kind of examination before it's green lighted. Therefore, you're inviting some public comment at that point in time. Or there's instances where it may not be appropriate, so we may not view it as needed because it is what it is. It's R3.
Well, if you're seeing site plans, then really what you have a planned unit development, really, more than you have an R3 then maybe, right?
Well, when you say planned unit development, though, I think what you're imagining is just different housing styles within the development. What we're talking about planned development is mixing commercial.
Offices and everything else.
Well, and the planned development shall show, what we're envisioning is you will show what parts of the development are going to be pieces of the R3. So you're showing something as R3 within the planned development. So in a sense, you can assemble different zoning districts within a proposal as a planned development. Does that make sense? So within this area would be R3, and within this area be R1, and within this area be R1A, and this area be a C commercial. And you're showing kind of the extent of what you're wanting to do.
But isn't that what I guess that's what I thought you were saying when you were saying we're seeing more just site.
We're talking about site plans when you have multiple units on a single lot.
Right. We're talking the same.
I was guessing you were.
Yeah, no, not
Sorry.
the PUD.
I'm
It's,
sorry,
yeah,
I was
multiple, and we talked about defining it as when you have two or more buildings on a lot, then we'd want to see more of that, how you organize your drives and how you configure it. And that's what a lot of those R3s, like that we've been looking at, tend to do
In
that
other
with-
communities, yeah.
with site planning.
So just to apply then this to the discussion that's happened over the last couple of weeks with the plats that we looked at today, again, would that then require them, if they want to rezone, they would have to bring more or less their layout for the area? Is that what we're saying
Well, not
here?
for the rezoning, but for the subdivision review, the review of the subdivision itself. If they went in and, like Eisenach Village is all one lot, okay? It's just one big lot. So we would ask for the site plan for that, for the build-out of that development.
We would approve the rezoning first, and then there'd be a second stage where they came back later.
Right?
Or it could be simultaneous.
It's on
Or- and it
page
could- and a lot of
4
times
of
it will be
9
simultaneous.
on the proposed.
And that's correct, Heidi, to answer your question.
And we have seen it where they've come right at the same meeting too. It's a little confusing to the public, but it's been done.
It sometimes is, but there's a disconnect if you say, I'm coming in and I want to do R3, and they're saying, well, what are you going to do? I'm not sure yet, but I know it's going to be R3. That makes it difficult for people, and I can understand the concern that someone has living next to that if they're not sure what's going to happen.
So it almost does have to happen simultaneously then, because it's not going to fix that problem if it's after it's rezoned. Or am I?
But you,
Well, we can't legally
Sorry?
require that, but we can't legally require that because people they can ask for rezoning. And we have to consider with what the evidence we have at the time. May not go through if people are concerned about it.
But some developers won't go that next step until they get the rezoning. They don't want to
Because
spend
they
the
don't want to
money.
spend all that time, engineering time and money.
Because they want to see, can they go to the density they're seeking, or for housing layout pattern they're seeking before they do it, So that's the question.
But when those people bought there, and if they would, go there, the step that they need to do and look, and it was planned as residential, doesn't say what kind of residential it's going to be. I mean, they're open to that situation, and there's nothing,
But to their credit, if R3 right now allows apartment buildings, then they have some concerns that they should be able to express. I mean, I'm saying that we had restricted it to 4 units, so it was actually restrictive to be closer to what we proposed to have adopted here.
which was part of what came up here when we looked at the petition.
Right. So we'll bring it back.
Okay.
And I think we've got some feedback, and we just need to get it back so we can bring back a final presentation.
Okay. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Is there any adjournment business?
Move we adjourn.
We are adjourned.